I'd like to bring up to the stage, without further ado, the man who makes all this possible, AFS Artistic Director, Richard Linklater. Thanks, Lars. All right, Fanny and Alexander. And everybody's talking about the 3 hour. You know there is a 5 hour plus version of this. This is the short version. So just keep that in mind. If you ever want to watch that, Criterion has a great version. But no, we're watching it on 35 millimeter. This is the cut Bergman wanted seen at that time theatrically. Back then they were always doing these. It was done for Swedish television, 5-part epic. But this is it, man. I saw this in '83. Remember staggering out of the theater. I don't even know. What do you say about such a staggering masterpiece? Or what do you say about maybe the top few directors, filmmakers to ever live? Fortunately, Bergman was such a great writer. I think he's the greatest screenwriter ever. But he wrote beautifully, and he wrote a few memoirs, The Magic Lantern, and another book called Images. So I was looking through them just the last few days, and I'm going to pull a few quotes that give just a little context, not much. But, Bergman was the master of existential angst. From the 50s on, I think probably for at least two generations of film people, if you looked at art film, it was Bergman's picture there, or the guy from Seventh Seal, Death, it was just what an art film was, and they always show, Wild Strawberries, Seventh Seal, Persona, Kreisman Whispers. These are the films I had seen before Fanny and Alexander came out. So it was fun to just be around when the latest Bergman film, and he's at that point 65, and he says, this is my last film. So this is his last film. He did live another 25 years and made a film in about 2003, I think, Saraband, which was a continuation of Scenes from a Marriage, which is a great film, by the way. So he was 84 when he did that. But this really is, think of it as a last film. And because he approached it that way. And I think he was approaching it, he had sort of landed in the childhood of his memory. And he also, what's different in this film than all his other films, these angsty, who was more, existential dread, is there a God, why am I alive, director, he really fit the 50s and 60s, just what was going on in the air there. But this film has a lot of joy in it. It's really got, especially the first third, it's this great scene of childhood. But in people who knew Bergman, he said it was kind of in response. Apparently his film sets were always a lot of fun. I've seen some of those behind the scenes making ofs, and everybody's laughing and having a great time. The films are so serious, but he had a lot of joy, a lot of laughter. They all had a great time, but they're making these serious films. And I think people had always told him, like Ingmar, how come that part of you's never in any movies? And I don't think he approached his art that way. But he does in this film. And here's something he wrote in his diary as he was starting to write the script to this in the late 70s. I want to master my anxiety, relieve tension, and triumph over my deterioration. I want to depict, finally, the joy that I carry within me, in spite of everything, and which I so seldom and so feebly have given attention to in my work. To be able to express the power of action, decisiveness, the vitality, and the kindness. Yes, for once, that would not be a bad idea. So he brings that in here, and like I said, it's a kind of a childhood. It's not really his childhood. He was born in 1918. This takes place in, I think, in 1907. But it really is one of the great views of childhood, both the joy, exhilaration, and just terror. The film shifts. His father dies. This wonderful family situation changes very abruptly when the mom marries this bishop guy, and the film shifts. That becomes the terror part. So, not to give anything away, but he writes so eloquently about his own childhood. I cannot remember ever being bored. Rather, the days and hours exploded with these strange wonders, unexpected sights, and magical moments. I can still roam through the landscape of my childhood and recreate the lighting, smells, people, places, moments, gestures, intonations, and objects. Seldom do these memories have any particular meaning. They're like bits of film, short or long, with no point, shot at random. In another bit. This is the prerogative of childhood. To move in complete freedom between magic and oatmeal porridge, between boundless terror and a joy that threatens to burst within you. There are no limits except forbidden things and rules. which were like shadows, mostly unfathomable. It was difficult for me to differentiate between what existed in my imagination and what was real. If I made the effort, perhaps I could make the reality remain real. But then, for instance, there were always the ghosts and visions. What was I supposed to do with them? And the fairy tales, were they real or not? So this movie is all of that. It's fairy tale, it's real, it's beautiful, and let's get started. Okay, thanks for being here. I mean, did anyone ever have a greater artistic life than Ingmar Bergman? Holy shit, the guy made films in the 40s, and he made a film in 2003. He directed, I think, 170 plays. He was the head of the theater there, made films just whenever he wanted. He really, it's an unbelievable artistic life. And yeah, if you want to read a great autobiography, read his books. You know,
Magic Lantern.
Yeah, it's just a great life in the arts. I mean, the guy's just such a pure artist, you know. He plays out his own, you know, demons and dread and psychology, you know, in his movies. So, you know, so clearly. But I remember being in Stockholm once. I was amazed how much the Swedes just didn't like him. You know, they're just so like, oh, Bergman, he's so serious. You know, they're just, you know, because, you know, any country, they have all these filmmakers, and we only know one, you know.
Right.
Bergman, they're like, oh, they were just kind of sick of him. This was the 90s. It was so ungenerous. I'm sure it's very different now that he's gone, but
yeah,
the statues are going up, I'm sure. But, I mean, I say they had a love-hate thing. I think he was just such a towering figure in their country and in just the history of cinema, theater, everything. So
the thing about Bergman's career, as you look at it, it's, you know, I mean, there's a confluence of special circumstances, but it's not like he had to compromise through those years. So he was able to really make a lot of films that were his films.
Yeah, whoever had that kind of support from a country, from the funding he got. He said he never struggled for funding. His films did just well enough, and he kept the budgets just low enough that he was able to. I mean, this is an epic. It's so beautifully designed, and you know, it's so rich. It's by far his biggest film, and I think it's the biggest film in the history of his country.
So it's so
probably still.
It's so richly and beautifully designed that you really have I have the illusion that I can smell it.
Yeah,
some of those movies, it's so well designed that you can smell the wood.
Yeah, that's why I read that quote before about he could just smell. You know, it is an articulation, a manifestation, you know, of that. So beautiful, and it's so. I mean, it's so exquisite. But God, the Bishop's, you know, place. It's so. It might as well be a black and white movie there, right? The colors just drained out of it. The faces of those women, and how cruel is that to have? Harriet Anderson, who's the babe of all time, you know, she was Monica in Summer with Monica. You know, in 400 Blows, it's the picture Antoine Doinel steals, you know, just the hot. That was
the maid with the tightly combed hair, and who's the most terrifying person
who rats him out.
Yeah.
Yeah, who has that kind of thrill. She's going, she's so creepy.
She was one of the first sex symbols in Summer with Monica.
Well, because they started doing nudity over there before they did here. So a film like that, he did that in 54? And it was distributed in the U.S. as kind of like a nudie film. Here it's this art film, but she's this hot babe in it. It's such a great movie. That one, you know, I just love that movie so much.
It's interesting because over the past couple of months, I've seen your new movie twice, Boyhood, really? And I'm watching it. I'm watching this, and that's present in my mind, and I'm thinking, wow, I wonder if this, in some way, the stepfather. I'm not spoiling the film here, but you know, the sort of stepfather thing was kind of reminded me in both ways of Boyhood.
Stepfathers can be pretty scary. Yeah. That's all I can say.
But it wasn't you weren't consciously going, oh yeah, I'll do a little bit of this in my movie.
I probably was. I mean, I mean, this film just floored me at the time. I don't know if I said it before. I remember just walking out of this film in '83, just in a daze for like the next day. I went home and my roommate, had this look. He was asking me, how was it? And I was just like, I couldn't even talk. So.
It was my first time seeing it because I
remembered it really well. I've seen it since I saw it maybe once or twice over the 30 years, but I thought I knew it all. I thought it kind of ended with him getting knocked down by the dead stepfather. I forgot it ended with Strindberg's dream play. Of course, that's a great ending.
So should I now watch the 5-hour version?
I don't know about now. Maybe this weekend. Yeah, I don't know. It's getting late. Yeah.
I should probably go to bed.
No. It's great. Yeah, I've seen the 5-hour version once. I think when it came out. So.
I wonder if we have any contributions.
I can't even remember what parts are missing. It's just it feels like the same thing in my mind. The way this film flows, it's just like a dream.
I would actually like to see the five different 1-hour installments and see the way those were cut.
But they just flow one into the next, kind of like Scenes from a Marriage is like that. There's a 5-hour version of Scenes from a Marriage. It's kind of like the great, I don't know, I mean, this is about childhood, but it's really so much about the brothers in the theater. And, Bergman said he was all three brothers. He felt himself evenly divided between those guys. There's the Oscar, the man of the theater, Gustav, the kind of crazy guy. I think he felt like he was that guy. I think he had mistresses, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then Carl, the more stern guy with, so he felt he was from the adult perspective. But such a beautiful, evocation of childhood, just the imagination. There's really nothing like it.
The magic.
Yeah.
I wonder if we have any contributions or questions or just comments or anything. Right back here, yeah.
I was interested in the part played by the play. This is a movie, and theater is an important part. And I recall his exquisite magic flute, which is a...
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you as a filmmaker about... I don't know, the relationship between film and theater. That is, for example, Bergman would seem to be a filmmaker who embraces the theater. But I would imagine not all filmmakers feel that way.
Well, there's very few. I said some weeks ago, I was talking about Fosse, and I threw it out there, like, who else besides, maybe I was just speaking of English language, Fosse and Kazan, I thought, were the two guys who brought a certain genius to both. I would say Bergman, although I remember hearing some people complain about his Hamlet or something, but I mean, he did so many plays. I think he's really known for his Strindbergs and his Ibsens, his homeboys. Those would tour the world. He'd be in Brooklyn showing it, with a presentation or something. He did that all those years after this. He retired from films to do theater, but he did these things. I don't think he even considered them, they're sort of hybrids. They were TV movies. He did one right after this big retirement. It was called After the Rehearsal, and it stars the young man who plays Alexander. He's in it. But he considered those kind of not really movies. They were just... And I think the Magic Flute, his film, The Magic Flute, I think that's the only adaptation maybe he ever did of his own, He had a really clean career. He wrote all his movies, and in theater, I don't think he wrote plays. There were two very different worlds. He must have had two very different approaches. Because, a lot of, like Mike Leigh does theater a little bit, but their plays, he writes them. Woody Allen's theater is just, why would he do it? The theater is a playwright's medium. So it's weird, Bergman, the great writer, didn't really write for theater. He wrote for film. And theater, he just adapted, he just staged the greats. So I don't know, what dictated that approach, but it's very clean. There's not much overlap there.
And Bergman would in his writing, he would just go on his island and just be by himself for a long time. You wonder how he had time to do that with as busy as he was.
Yeah. He'd do a few plays a year, and then do a film every summer. And, He just kind of what a life, you know.
And he didn't like to be bothered when he was writing. He would just go into the island, and he didn't want to have any appointments or have to deal with anything. So it's kind of incredible that he would have that.
Yeah, he was kind of that old school. I think men of that generation. I think before they both died, Erland Josephson and Bergman. I read some interview. Oh no, it's a filmed interview with them, and they're saying, yeah, we're the last guys who could get away with that. You know, just you can't really be a father like that anymore. His daughter tells a story. I mean, Bergman had like 9 kids, but over many decades. Yeah, like he hadn't seen his daughter in like a year and a half or something. He runs up to her, "Oh, Lynn, how great to see you." Picks her up, gives her a big hug. But now Daddy's very busy in the theater. This goes right back to work. They all worshipped him, but I don't think they, his life was elsewhere.
In the little world.
Was in that world,
Right over here, yeah.
I'm still processing it, but in a movie like that with so many like thematic elements all throughout it, do you think he consciously was designing how they all work together?
Yeah, I think he had to. It's a pretty conscious thing to write a screenplay or stage a play. I think he let that unconscious flow. Obviously, that's what he always did. But it's a pretty clean narrative. We go from here to there and back to there.
He's one of those people, and this is, we're talking about great artists. There's only a few of them that are that great, that have that ability to even when you see something, you're saying, oh, there's like a rhyming conceit there, or there's these mirrored images, or there's this structure that appears to be so spelled out that it really is organic, that it comes from that genius. The characters come to life within him, and the things they do are beautiful.
Yeah, there's no false notes. Everything's beautiful. The performances are kind of pitch perfect. Everyone's perfectly cast. It's really amazing. And we mentioned this. It was actually written for Ingrid Bergman was going to play the matron, the grandmother. Liv Ullmann was most likely going to play the mom. Mm-hmm. And you said Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow was supposed to be the bishop.
Yeah.
But it was actually like an agent didn't give him the message in time and booked some other probably crappy film.
But those they're great. 3 of the greats, And yet, I think it's a better movie for not having them in it. To not know, like if it would have been Max von Sydow, he brings in baggage from the 20 other Bergman films he's in and other things. And I don't know, the guy is perfect.
Yeah, he really is.
It's so perfectly creepy. And yet you could see where maybe the mom would marry him. It's a fine line there. And then the mom's kind of I don't know. They're just great. But then who isn't great in a Bergman film,
Yeah, it's hard to think about those clunker performances.
Yeah, you don't really, that doesn't really happen. You kind of accept the whole thing, and they're all kind of, each one's its own animal.
Sweet. First off, thank you for bringing this film to AFS because it's great to see it.
Yeah.
And the original
We're the only people in the world right now who just saw Fanny Alexander on 35 millimeter. Thank you, Lars.
Because it's such a lush and immersive film, it's great to see it like this. And since you were saying before about the miniseries, and I was really curious about how you experienced both pieces, because they're very different experiences. I mean, for me, like seeing it now, this is the first time seeing this, but I've seen the miniseries before, and I was like, this is so different. So just curious about your opinion on that.
Do you see them as very different?
Yes.
The 5 hours very
I
different.
do, especially interactively. I see it very differently.
Okay. Well, there's your answer, whoever was asking before, because I think I saw them so far apart, so many years in between, that they sort of meld together in my mind. I'm having a similar experience as I watch both, whatever I'm feeling. So I know there's more, obviously there's more little subplots and more for some of the characters to do, but I always thought the gist of it felt the same. But
it's funny, when he was trying to cut it down, I was reading images today at lunch, when he was trying to cut it down to the 3-hour cut, he ended up with a 4-hour cut. But being Bergman, he didn't say, oh, well, now I got to go trim out this and that. He had to start all over again from the beginning in order to arrive at the 3-hour cut.
That must be torturous, really, I would think, to have a movie you're happy with that's 5 and to get it down to 3. Ugh.
Well,
But
it was dealing with the
he never
Weinsteins.
complained. He never complained, though. He never, I mean, he really owns this. I mean, hell, this won the Academy Award. It was the film of the year. Often voted as one of the best films of the last, 20 or, whatever decades since then. It's always been at the top of so many lists, in this series, we've really, the 3 epics we've done, Reds, I put in a similar category.
Yeah.
And Das Boot in a different way. Another great epic. So, it's cool to.
All the way in the very back there.
Yeah, I was a little confused when the kids get put in the trunk and they're taken away. When they got back to the bishop, it was like he wasn't pissed off, or he was he didn't react to that. It seemed like, was that part of the footage that is in the 5-hour version?
It's a pretty willful moment when the light changes. Erland Josephson goes and then the kids are upstairs.
Yeah.
I think if you scream and look to the heavens, maybe you can. I don't know. It worked.
Never tried it.
They got out. I think that's when he was like, okay, how do I get the kids out? And it's like, oh, well, I'll just do a magic trick. Yeah, it's a good trick when you're writing.
Well,
You can get away with that. So, but no, the more I think of it, it's like, it's a, there's dream play, but this is dream film. It's the way Alexander would remember these events. The way it happens is you find out that the evil stepfather died last night, and then a year later, or even a day later, maybe you're thinking you conjured it. And then in your memory, as you go through your life, the order jumps, and then you caused it. That kind of thing. That's how I interpret all that. But it's kind of from his memory. So.
Yeah, things don't fit together with square edges necessarily.
Yeah, and the film's not really.
Right over here, yeah.
Comment I wanted to make was sort of observation of the way, almost choreography within the house, where there was it was almost like a dance of the family and in that environment, and was much more sort of this kind of just movement as opposed to then contrasted in the bishop's house, and everything's very stark and very simple.
And then in Jacoby's house too.
Yeah.
It's like different styles of movement and different spaces in each one.
Well, one's very much alive, with creativity, and one's a house of a very strict Lutheran God, I think. So.
Oh God, it's so awful.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, this is the worst. Yeah,
you can imagine.
So conflicted about that.
Right back here, and then I think this will be our last contribution, and we'll talk a little bit about next week's movie.
To go back to casting, why do you think Bergman cast a female in the role of crazy brother Ismail?
I know. That's so fascinating, isn't it? Wow. In my mind, I always remembered it being a woman in that part. It was I conflated it with the maid, just a different version of the maid who wasn't, but it's Ishmael, but it's a woman. I don't know.
It's like this mystical, but
yes.
But you would never get that effect.
You're saying we're the same person? Yes. So I don't know. It's kind of, I don't.
Sure.
What was did I miss something, or did they knock on the door to ask the brother to take in the breakfast or whatever twice? Seems like they knocked on the door and then they clipped right back to knocking on the door again. And then seeing where they went.
It's 4 doors. There's one
Oh.
door, slide door, because he's supposedly
It
violent.
was another door, all right.
Two doors. But now that we have that cleared up, we can all, yeah.
There was a sale on doors that year.
Get smart, a lot of doors.
We're going to, next week we go into like a 90-minute movie, which will be a change. It's a pretty weird one. It's Rumblefish.
Yeah.
And so Rumblefish is, oddly enough,
Francis in the 80s. Yeah.
It was the movie that he a much more successful at the box office movie was The Outsiders. But when Francis Coppola made The Outsiders, through the whole thing, he was promising himself, damn it, if I make it through this, I'm going to make Rumblefish. So this was the movie that he made for himself.
And Rumblefish is kind of his Bergman film.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of clocks.
Yeah.
clocks without hands and time, and it's a teen Bergman film. How's that for an intro? You got to be here next week. Okay.
With an amazing cast.
And very American. With a great Matt Dillon.
Matt Dillon and Mickey Rourke, the best. And then a whole bunch of other great people. Dennis Hopper.
Well, be very curious to see. And Nicolas Cage, young
Nicholas Coppola.
Larry Fishburne before he was Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, a lot of good people, and it's a print from Universal, which means Universal always has really good prints. So that's also
black
really
and
good
white,
news.
good soundtrack. But yeah, be very curious to see. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Be curious to see how it plays.
We've only got a few more of these, unless you decide that you want to.
To get us through 83.
Get us through 83, and then and then at some point
you notice that and then soon.
After the Academy Awards and all that, after you get through the Academy Awards, win your
maybe,
Oscar and all that stuff.
Maybe in the fall. I don't know. Well, there'll be a 84, 5, and 6.
Okay. All
As
right,
we know, there's so many films.
Mona Lisa.
So many great films.
We could do Mona Lisa because Bob Hoskins just died.
Oh.
Do you know about that? Sorry to break the news to you.
No, when?
Today or yesterday?
No, I've been out of it.
Yeah. Oh well. Mona Lisa can be in the next part of the series if you feel like doing Mona Lisa. But I'm looking forward to it. But we've got
so many great films.
We've got Rumblefish. Then we've got Atlantic City the next week.
Yeah,
which is a great one. And then we've got a week off, maybe we add special. Yeah, we were talking about that. And then for the very end to wrap the whole thing up, we've got Out of the Blue also with Dennis Hopper. So we hope you guys can ride it out with this.
What's the '80s without Dennis Hopper?
Dennis Hopper's return to greatness.
Absolutely. So.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thank you everybody who stayed up late.